The Philosophy of Natural Magic, by Agrippa. Chapter 1. The Threefold World and Universal Hierarchy. Consider that there exists a threefold world. Elementary, celestial, and intellectual realms exist wherein every subordinate entity is governed by its superior, receiving the influence of its inherent virtues, so that the supreme creator and principal architect of all existence transmits the powers of his omnipotence unto us through angels, the heavens, the stars, the elements, animals, plants, metals, and stones, having formed and created all these entities for our benefit. Scholars of wisdom deem it entirely rational that we might ascend through these concurrent stages, traversing each world to reach the primordial realm itself, the creator and first cause of all things, from whom all existence emanates and proceeds, thereby enabling us to partake not merely of those virtues already inherent in the most exalted of creations, but additionally to draw down new virtues from the celestial spheres above. Thus, they pursue the virtues of the elementary world through the disciplines of medicine and natural philosophy, analyzing the diverse compositions of natural elements. Subsequently, they explore the celestial world through its rays and influences, in accordance with astrological principles and mathematical doctrines, thereby uniting the celestial virtues with the elementary. Furthermore, they ratify and consolidate all these forces with the powers of various intelligences, through the sacred ceremonies of religion. I shall endeavor to delineate the order and methodology of all these practices within these 3 volumes. Of these, the first encompasses natural magic, the second celestial magic, and the third ceremonial magic. However, I remain uncertain whether it constitutes an unforgivable presumption on my part, that I, a man of such modest judgment and erudition, should in my very youth so confidently embark upon an enterprise as arduous and intricate as this. Therefore, regarding whatever has been stated here thus far, and shall subsequently be articulated by me, I would ask no one to assent to it, nor shall I myself, any further than such propositions are endorsed by the Universal Church and the Congregation of the Faithful. Chapter 2. Magic as the Supreme Science. Magic is a discipline of wondrous virtue, replete with the most exalted mysteries, encompassing the most profound contemplation of arcane matters, alongside an understanding of their nature, power, quality, substance, and properties. It entails a comprehensive knowledge of nature in her entirety, instructing us in the disparities and harmonies that exist among things. From this knowledge, magic brings forth its miraculous effects, uniting the virtues of various elements by applying them to one another and to their appropriate subordinate subjects, intricately binding them together through the powers and virtues of the superior celestial bodies. This stands as the most perfect and paramount science, a sacred and sublime manifestation of philosophy, and, ultimately, the absolute zenith of all distinguished philosophical inquiry. For observe that all prescriptive philosophy is divided into natural, mathematical, and theological. We study the number and the nature of those entities termed elements, observing what fire, earth, and air bring forth, from whence the heavens derive their origins, whence arise the tides, and whence the rainbow appears, clad in vibrant hues. We inquire what compels the gathered clouds, so dark and black, to issue forth lightnings and a thunderous crack, what produces the nocturnal flames and comets bright, what causes the earth to swell and subsequently quake, what constitutes the seed of metals and of gold, and what virtues and wealth the coffers of nature hold. All these phenomena does natural philosophy, the grand observer of nature, contain, instructing us according to Virgil's muse. It reveals whence all things flow. It uncovers whence mankind and beast originate, whence fire, whence rain and snow, whence earthquakes arise, why the vast ocean breaches its banks and then retreats once more, whence derives the potency of herbs, whence the courage and rage of brutes, and the genesis of all varieties of stone, of creeping creatures, and of fruits. Mathematical philosophy, however, instructs us in discerning the quantity of natural bodies as they extend into 3 dimensions, as well as in comprehending the motion and trajectories of celestial bodies. It asks, as if in great haste, what compels the golden stars to march so fast? What causes the moon at times to mask her face, and the sun as well as if cast into disgrace? And as Virgil sings, he describes how the sun governs through the 12 zodiac signs, traversing the orb that is measured continuously with lines. It makes the starry pathways of the heavens known, as well as the profound eclipses of the sun and moon, Arcturus also, and the stars of rain, the 7 stars likewise, and the constellation of Charles's Wain, explaining why the winter suns descend toward the west with such speed, and what makes the winter nights so long before they finally pass. All these mysteries are thoroughly apprehended through mathematical philosophy. Hence, by observing the heavens we may foretell all the seasons, determining the precise times to reap and to sow, when it is opportune to launch our vessels into the deep, and when to wage war, and when to sleep in peace, and when to uproot trees, only to plant them anew so that they may bear fruit abundantly. Furthermore, theological philosophy or divinity elucidates the nature of God, the mind, intelligences, angels, devils, and the soul. It defines religion, sacred institutions, rites, temples, observances, and holy mysteries. It additionally instructs us regarding faith, miracles, the inherent virtues of words and geometric figures, and the clandestine operations and mysteries of seals. And, as Apuleius observed, it teaches us to properly comprehend and master the ceremonial laws, the sanctity of sacred objects, and the governance of religions. But to recollect myself, magic comprehends, unites, and actuates these 3 principal faculties. Consequently, it was deservedly esteemed by the ancients as the highest and most sacred iteration of philosophy. It was, as historical records indicate, brought to light by the most sagacious authors and renowned writers, among whom Zamalxus and Zoroaster were so distinguished that many believe them to be the very progenitors of this science. Their path was subsequently followed by Abaris the Hyperborean, Charmandes, Damigeron, Eudoxus, and Hermippus. There were also other eminent and select individuals, such as Mercurius Trismegistus, Porphyry, Iamblichus, Plotinus, Proclus, Dardanus, Orpheus the Thracian, Gog the Grecian, Germa the Babylonian, and Apollonius of Tyana. Osthenes likewise wrote exceptionally well concerning this art. When his treatises were seemingly lost, Democritus of Abdera recovered them, subsequently publishing the texts alongside his own commentaries. Furthermore, Pythagoras, Empedocles, Democritus, Plato, and numerous other renowned philosophers traversed great oceans to master this art. Upon their return, they disseminated this knowledge with profound devotion, revering it as a magnificent secret. It is equally well known that Pythagoras and Plato sought out the prophets of Memphis to acquire this wisdom, journeying through nearly all of Syria, Egypt, Judea, and the schools of the Chaldeans. They undertook these travels to ensure they would not remain ignorant of the most sacred memorials and records of magic, and to thoroughly furnish themselves with divine knowledge. Therefore, whosoever desires to study this discipline, if he is not well versed in natural philosophy, which reveals the qualities of all things and uncovers the occult properties of every being. If he is not proficient in mathematics, understanding the aspects and alignments of the stars upon which the sublime virtues and properties of all things depend, and if he is not deeply learned in theology, which elucidates those immaterial substances that govern and minister unto all creation, he cannot possibly hope to comprehend the underlying rationality of magic. For there is no operation performed by magic alone, nor any endeavor that is purely magical, which does not inherently encompass these three distinct faculties. Chapter 3. The Four Elements and Their Mixtures. There exist four elements which serve as the foundational principles of all corporeal entities: fire, earth, water, and air, of which all inferior elemental bodies are compounded, not through mere accumulation, but by means of complex transmutation and union. Correspondingly, upon their destruction, they are resolved once more into these primordial elements. Indeed, none of the perceptible elements exists in a state of absolute purity. Rather, they are mixed to varying degrees and possess an inherent aptitude to be transmuted into one another. Even as earth, becoming corrupted and dissolved, transforms into water, and this water, when rendered dense and solid, reverts to earth. Yet, when evaporated by heat, it transitions into air, and this air, upon being ignited, becomes fire, which, upon being extinguished, reverts to air. But when cooled again following its combustion, it coalesces into earth, stone, or sulfur, a phenomenon distinctly manifested by lightning. Plato likewise held the conviction that earth is entirely mutable, and that the remaining elements transmute not only into earth, but also into one another in perpetual succession. Conversely, it is the assertion of the more nuanced philosophers that earth itself is not altered, but rather softened and intermingled with the other elements, which effect its dissolution before it ultimately reverts to its original state. Now, each of the elements possesses two specific qualities. The former it retains as intrinsic to its own nature, while in the latter, acting as an intermediary, it harmonizes with the element that immediately succeeds it. For fire is hot and dry, earth is dry and cold, water is cold and moist, and air is moist and hot. In this manner, owing to these two opposing qualities, the elements stand in contrariety to one another, precisely as fire opposes water, and earth opposes air. Furthermore, the elements are diametrically opposed upon an additional basis. Certain among them are heavy, namely earth and water, whereas others are light, specifically air and fire. For this reason, the Stoics designated the former as passive, and the latter as active. Yet again, Plato distinguishes them through an alternative paradigm, attributing three distinct qualities to each. To fire he assigns brightness, tenuity, and motion, while to earth he ascribes darkness, density, and quiescence. Consequently, based upon these characteristics, the elements of fire and earth are direct contraries. However, the remaining elements derive their attributes from these two extremes, such that air inherits two qualities from fire, tenuity and motion, and one from earth, which is darkness. In a parallel fashion, water appropriates two qualities from earth, darkness and density, and one from fire, namely motion. Yet fire is twice as tenuous as air, thrice as mobile, and 4 times as luminous. Correspondingly, air is twice as luminous, thrice as tenuous, and 4 times as mobile as water. Therefore, water is twice as luminous as earth, thrice as tenuous, and 4 times as mobile. Thus, as fire is proportional to air, so air is to water and water to earth. And conversely, as earth is to water, so water is to air and air to fire. This constitutes the fundamental root and foundation of all bodies, natures, virtues, and miraculous phenomena. And whoever shall comprehend these elemental qualities and their myriad permutations shall effortlessly manifest wonders and astonishments, thereby attaining absolute perfection in magic. Chapter 4. The Threefold Division of Elements. There exist, therefore, as previously stated, for elements, without the flawless comprehension of which we can achieve absolutely nothing within the realm of magic. Each of these, moreover, is threefold, ensuring that the quaternary number yields the sum of 12. And by transmuting through the septenary into the denary, a progression is established toward the supreme unity, upon which every virtue and miraculous operation relies. To the first order belong the pure elements, which are neither compounded nor altered, nor do they permit admixture. Rather, they are utterly incorruptible. It is not of them, but through them, that the virtues of all natural phenomena are brought into actuality. No mortal is capable of fully articulating their virtues, for they possess the capacity to exact infinite influence upon all things. He who remains ignorant of these shall never succeed in manifesting any phenomenon of wonder. To the second order belong those elements that are compounded, mutable, and impure, yet which may, through artifice, be restored to their pristine simplicity. When thus reduced to their pure essence, their virtue perfects, above all else, the entirety of nature's occult and mundane operations. These serve as the bedrock of all natural magic. To the third order pertain those elements which, originally and intrinsically, are not true elements, but are rather doubly compounded, diverse, and intermutually changeable. They serve as infallible mediums, and are thereby designated the middle nature, or the soul of the middle nature. Exceedingly few individuals possess a true understanding of their profound mysteries. Within them resides, by means of specific numbers, degrees, and orders, the perfection of every conceivable effect across all domains, whether natural, celestial, or supercelestial. They abound in wonders and mysteries, proving equally operative in natural magic as they are in the divine. For from these, and exclusively through them, emanate the binding, loosing, and transmutation of all matter, the revelation and prognostication of all future events, as well as the banishment of malefic entities and the invocation of benevolent spirits. Let no man, therefore, devoid of these three classifications of elements and a thorough knowledge thereof, presume himself capable of executing any endeavor within the occult sciences of magic and nature. Yet whosoever discerns the method of reducing the elements of one order into those of another, the impure into the pure, the compounded into the simple, and can distinctly comprehend their intrinsic nature, virtue, and power according to number, degree, and order, without severing their underlying substance, that individual shall effortlessly attain mastery over the knowledge and flawless manipulation of all natural phenomena and celestial mysteries. Chapter 5. The Properties of Fire and Earth. There are two fundamental forces, as Hermes observes, fire and earth, which are altogether sufficient for the execution of all miraculous works. The former is inherently active, whereas the latter is completely passive. Fire, as Dionysius asserts, moves in all things and through all things, arriving and departing in sheer radiance. It remains luminous within all forms, yet concurrently dwells occulted and unknown. When subsisting independently, it is boundless and invisible, intrinsically sufficient for every action strictly proper to its nature. It is highly mobile, yielding itself in a certain fashion to whatsoever draws near it. It is a renewing force, the guardian of nature, an illuminator uncomprehended by obscured lights. It is pristine, divisible, prone to rebounding and ascending upward, swift in its trajectories, elevated, and perennially engendering motion. It comprehends all else while remaining wholly uncomprehended. It requires no external sustenance, augmenting itself in secrecy, and unveiling its majesty only to those entities equipped to receive it. Unceasingly active, potent, and invisibly omnipresent within all forms simultaneously, it brooks no affront or opposition. Rather, as though enacting sudden retribution, it violently subjugates all things to its dominion. It remains entirely incomprehensible, impalpable, undiminished, and infinitely prolific in every dispensation of its essence. Fire, as Pliny suggests, constitutes the boundless and destructive facet of the natural world, leaving it perpetually debatable whether it ultimately consumes or engenders the greater multitude of things. Fire is, in its essence, entirely singular, permeating all matter, as the Pythagoreans maintain. It is dispersed expansively across the heavens, radiating brilliance. Yet within the infernal realms, it is constrained, obscure, and tormenting, while in the intermediary spheres, it partakes simultaneously of both natures. Therefore, while fire is inherently unified, it becomes manifold within the receptacles that harbor it, distributing itself diversely among disparate subjects, as Cleanthes attests in the writings of Cicero. Consequently, the fire that we utilize is invariably extracted from other substances. It resides within stones, coaxed forth by the striking of steel. It permeates the earth, causing the soil to smoke upon being unearthed. It dwells in water, thereby heating thermal springs and wells. It lies secluded in the ocean's depths, rendering the seas warm when agitated by tempests, and it infuses the air, igniting it into combustion. Furthermore, all animals and animate creatures, without exception, alongside the entirety of the vegetative kingdom, are sustained by this warmth, and everything that draws breath lives solely by virtue of this enclosed, innate heat. The attributes of the celestial fire from above are a fecund heat, rendering all things fruitful, and a radiant light, bestowing life upon all creation. Conversely, the properties of the infernal fire consist of a parching, desiccating heat that relentlessly consumes all things, accompanied by an absolute darkness that renders all existence utterly barren. The celestial and resplendent fire banishes the spirits of darkness. Equally, this our terrestrial fire kindled from wood repels the same, inasmuch as it bears an analogy to and serves as the vehiculum of that superior light, as well as of him who proclaims, "I am the light of the world," which is the true fire, the Father of lights, from whom every good thing that is given originates. He sends forth the light of his fire, communicating it first to the sun and the remainder of the celestial bodies, and by these, acting as mediating instruments, conveys that divine illumination into our earthly fire. As, therefore, the spirits of darkness are more formidable in obscurity, so good spirits, which are the angels of light, are augmented not only by that light which is divine of the sun and celestial, but also by the light of our common fire. Hence it was that the first and most wise institutors of religions and ceremonies ordained that prayers, hymns, and all manner of divine worship whatsoever should not be performed without lighted candles or torches. Furthermore, they commanded that, for the driving away of wicked spirits, lights and fires should be kindled beside the corpses of the dead, and that they should not be removed until the expiations were, after a holy manner, performed and the bodies buried. And the great Jehovah himself in the old law commanded that all his sacrifices should be offered with fire, and that fire should always be burning upon the altar, a custom the priests of the altar did invariably observe and preserve amongst the Romans. Now, the basis and foundation of all the elements is the earth, for that is the object, subject, and receptacle of all celestial rays and influences. Within it are contained the seeds and seminal virtues of all things, and therefore it is said to be animal, vegetable, and mineral. Being rendered fecund by the other elements and the heavens, it brings forth all things of itself. It receives the abundance of all creation and stands, as it were, as the primordial fountain from whence all things spring. It is the center, foundation, and mother of all things. Take as much of it as you please, separated, washed, depurated, subtilized. If you allow it to rest in the open air a brief while, it will, being replete and abounding with heavenly virtues, spontaneously bring forth plants, worms, and other living things, as well as stones, and the bright sparks of metals. In it reside profound secrets. If at any time it shall be purified by the agency of fire, and reduced unto its elemental simplicity by a convenient washing. It is the primary matter of our creation, and the truest medicine that can restore and preserve us. Chapter 6. The Virtues of Water and Air. The remaining two elements, water and air, prove no less efficacious than the former. Neither is nature deficient in orchestrating profound marvels within them. There is so absolute a necessity of water, that without it no organism can sustain life. No herb nor plant whatsoever, without the vital moistening of water, can branch forth. In it resides the seminary virtue of all things, most notably of animals. The seeds of trees and plants, although they are earthy, must notwithstanding of necessity undergo putrefaction in water before they can be fruitful, whether they be steeped in the moisture of the earth, or with dew or rain, or any other water that is purposely applied to them. For Moses writes, that only earth and water bring forth a living soul. But he ascribes a twofold production of things to water, of beings swimming in the waters, and of creatures flying in the air above the earth. And that those productions that manifest in and upon the earth are partly attributable to the very water, the same scripture testifies, where it states that the plants and the herbs did not grow, because God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. Such is the efficacy of this element of water that spiritual regeneration cannot be achieved without it, as Christ himself attested to Nicodemus. Very great, also, is its virtue in the religious worship of God, in rites of expiation and purification. Indeed, the necessity of it is no less than that of fire. Infinite are its benefits, and diverse are its applications, as it is the medium by virtue of which all things subsist, are generated, nourished, and augmented. Thence it was that Thales of Miletus and Hesiod deduced that water was the genesis of all things, declaring it the first of all the elements, and the most potent precisely because it exercises mastery over all the rest. For, as Pliny observes, waters swallow up the earth, extinguish flames, ascend on high, and by the stretching forth of the clouds, challenge the heaven for their own. These same waters, upon falling, become the vital cause of all that grows within the earth. Innumerable are the wonders achieved by waters, according to the writings of Pliny, Solinus, and many other historians who chronicle its marvelous virtue. Ovid also makes mention of this in these verses. Horned Hammond's waters at high noon are cold, hot at sunrise and setting sun. Wood, immersed in bubbling athemas, is fired. The moon, then farthest from the sun, retired. Ciconian streams congeal his innards to stone who thereof drinks, and what therein is thrown. Crathis and Cybrus color the hair like amber or pure gold. Some fountains of a more prodigious kind not only alter the body but the mind. Who has not heard of obscene Salmachus, of the Ethiopian lake? For whosoever does but taste of this, their wits no longer keep, or forthwith fall into a deadly sleep. He who at Clitorius' fountain his thirst removes, loathes wine and, abstinent, mere water loves. With streams opposed to these, Lyncestus flows. They reel as drunk who drink too much of those. A lake in fair Arcadia stands, of old called Phaeneus, suspected as twofold. Fear and forbear to drink thereof by night unwholesome, wholesome by daylight. Josephus additionally recounts the wondrous nature of a certain river situated between Arsea and Raphanea, cities of Syria, which flows with a brimming channel all the Sabbath day, and then of a sudden ceases, as if the springs were obstructed. For all the 6 days you may pass over it dryshod. But again, on the 7th day, the waters return in abundance as before. For this reason, the local inhabitants christened it the Sabbath-day River, honoring the 7th day, which was sacred to the Jews. The Gospel similarly testifies to a sheep pool, into which whosoever first stepped, after the water was troubled by the angel, was made whole of whatsoever disease he possessed. We read that an identical virtue and efficacy resided in a spring of the Ionian nymphs, which was located within the territories belonging to the town of Elis, at a village named Heraclea, near the river Citharon. Whosoever stepped into it, being diseased, emerged entirely whole and cured of all his maladies. Pausanias further reports that in Lycaeus, a mountain of Arcadia, there existed a spring known as Agrippa, to which, as often as the aridity of the region threatened the destruction of the harvest, Jupiter's priest of Lycaeus would approach. After the offering of sacrifices, devoutly praying to the waters of the spring, and holding a bough of an oak in his hand, he would submerge it to the bottom of the hallowed spring. Then the waters, being troubled, a vapor ascending from thence into the air would be blown into clouds. These, joining together, overspread the entirety of the heavens, and a little after, dissolving into rain, watered all the surrounding country most wholesomely. Moreover, Rufus, a physician of Ephesus, alongside numerous other authors, chronicled strange phenomena concerning the marvels of waters, which, to the best of my knowledge, are documented by no other authority. It remains only that I speak of the air. This constitutes a vital spirit, permeating all beings, imparting life and subsistence to all creation, binding, moving, and filling all things. Consequently, the Hebrew sages do not reckon it among the elements, but rather consider it a medium or unifying adhesive, joining things together, and characterize it as the resounding spirit of the world's instrument. It immediately receives into itself the influences of all celestial bodies and subsequently communicates them to the other elements, as well as to all compounded bodies. Furthermore, the air receives into itself, akin to a divine mirror, the species of all things, both natural and artificial, as well as all manner of spoken words. It retains these forms, carrying them as it permeates the bodies of men and other beasts through their pores, thereby imprinting upon them in states of both wakefulness and slumber, and providing the substance for various peculiar dreams and divinations. For this reason, it is said that an individual passing a location where a murder has occurred, or where a corpse has recently been concealed, is seized with terror and dread. the air in that vicinity, being saturated with the macabre species of the slaughter, is inhaled, thereby agitating and troubling the spirit of the individual with that corresponding species, which engenders their sudden fear. Indeed, any phenomenon that produces an abrupt impression inevitably astonishes nature. Consequently, numerous philosophers held the conviction that air is the progenitor of dreams and of many other mental impressions, acting through the prolongation of images, similitudes, or species until they reach the senses. From there, they proceed to the fantasy and soul of the recipient, which, when unburdened by worldly cares and entirely unhindered, anticipates the reception of such species and is duly informed by them. For although the species of things are, by their inherent nature, conveyed to the senses of humanity and other creatures universally, they may nevertheless acquire celestial impressions whilst lingering within the air. By virtue of this astral influence, combined with the singular aptitude and disposition of the recipient, these species may be directed to the senses of one particular individual to the exclusion of others. Thus, it is entirely possible through natural means, wholly devoid of superstition and without the intercession of any mediating spirit, for a man to swiftly convey his thoughts to another residing at a vast and unknown distance. Although he may not precisely calculate the exact moment of reception, it must of necessity occur within 24 hours. I myself possess the knowledge of this practice and have frequently executed it. In times past, the abbot Trithemius likewise understood and performed this very feat additionally, when certain appearances, both spiritual and natural, emanate from objects, they present themselves to us through both light and motion, engaging the sight as well as the other senses. Occasionally, they effect wondrous transformations within us, as Plotinus both demonstrates and teaches. Furthermore, we observe how the south wind condenses the air into diaphanous clouds, which act as a mirror to reflect distant representations of castles, mountains, horses, men, and other entities. These phantasms promptly vanish the moment the clouds dissipate. In his Meteorology, Aristotle demonstrates that a rainbow is conceived within an aerial cloud much like a reflection in a mirror. Albertus asserts that the effigies of physical bodies may, through the inherent power of nature, be readily represented within moist air, precisely as the reflections of objects appear within reflective surfaces. Furthermore, Aristotle recounts the tale of a man for whom, due to the extreme frailty of his vision, the adjacent air functioned as a looking-glass. His optical beams reflected back upon himself, entirely unable to pierce the atmosphere. Consequently, wherever he journeyed, he believed he saw his own image walking before him, with its face turned toward his own. In a similar vein, through the artifice of specific mirrors, one may project whatever images one desires at a distance into the air, seemingly independent of the mirrors themselves. When the uneducated witness such phenomena, they presume they are beholding the apparitions of spirits or souls, when in truth these are merely lifeless semblances, akin only to their sources. It is a well-documented phenomenon that within a darkened chamber, bereft of illumination save for a solitary sunbeam entering through a minuscule aperture, if a white parchment or a flat mirror is positioned to intercept that light, one may observe upon it whatever actions are transpiring outside, illuminated by the sun's rays. There exists yet another stratagem of an even more wondrous nature. Should one take artificially painted images or inscribed letters and, on a clear night, align them against the beams of the full moon, their resemblances are multiplied in the air, drawn upwards, and reflected back in concert with the lunar rays. Consequently, An accomplice situated at a vast distance may behold, read, and decipher these messages within the very circumference and disk of the moon. This art of transmitting secrets proves exceedingly advantageous for towns and cities under siege. It is a technique frequently employed by Pythagoras in antiquity, and one that remains known to a select few in the present day, myself explicitly included. All these marvels, and countless others of an even grander scale, are fundamentally rooted in the very nature of the air, their underlying principles and causes being thoroughly expounded within the disciplines of mathematics and optics. And just as these visual resemblances are reflected back to the eye, auditory impressions are occasionally rebounded to the ear, a phenomenon made manifest in the echo. Nevertheless, there are esoteric arts far more profound than these, by which one may, from a remarkably remote distance, distinctly hear and comprehend the softest spoken words or whispered secrets of another. Arising from the airy element are the winds, which are, in essence, nothing more than air set into motion and violently agitated. Among these, there are four principal currents, blowing from the four cardinal corners of the heavens: Notus from the south, Boreas from the north, Zephyrus from the west, and Eurus from the east. The poet Pontanus encapsulates them in the following verses. Cold Boreas from the peak of Olympus blows, and from its base the clouded Notus flows. From setting Phoebus, fruitful Zephyrus flies, and barren Eurus from the sun's uprise. Notus is the southern wind, clouded, damp, tepid, and pestilential, which Hieronymus aptly titles the steward of the rains. Ovid describes it thus: Out flies the south wind on his dripping wings, shrouding his fearful visage in pitch-black clouds. His white hair streams, his beard is swollen with showers. Mists bind his brow, while rain from his bosom pours. Conversely, Boreas stands in direct opposition to Notus. As the northern wind, it is ferocious and roaring. It scatters the clouds, renders the sky serene, and binds the waters with rigid frost. Ovid introduces this wind by allowing it to speak for itself. Brute force befits me. With this thick clouds I drive, toss the blue billows, knotty oaks uprive, congeal soft snow, and beat the earth with hail. When I my brethren in the skies assail, we meet with such a catastrophic shock, that thundering heavens with our encounters rock, and cloud-struck lightning flashes from on high. When through the crannies of the earth I fly, and force her within her hollow caves, I make the spectres tremble, and the firm ground quake. Meanwhile Zephyrus, which is the western wind, is supremely gentle, blowing from the west with a most agreeable gale. Being cold and moist, it banishes the harsh remnants of winter, coaxing forth burgeoning branches and vibrant blossoms. In opposition stands Eurus, the eastern wind, which is additionally known as Apeliotes. It is characterized as watery, clouded, and ravenous in its temperament. Concerning these latter two, Ovid sings the following: To Persis and Sabia Eurus flies, whose fragrant gums perfume the blushing morn's uprise. Next to the evening, and the coastal shores that glow with setting Phoebus, flowery Zephyrus doth blow. In Scythia horrid Boreas holds his sovereign reign, beneath Boötes and the frozen Wain. The land opposed to this doth Auster steep with fruitful showers and clouds that ever weep. Chapter 7. Compound bodies and their elemental affinities. Following the four simple elements are the four classifications of perfect bodies compounded from them: namely stones, metals, plants, and animals. And although the generation of each relies upon the convergence and composition of all the elements together, every individual body follows and primarily resembles the singular element that predominates within it. Thus, all stones are decidedly earthy, as they are intrinsically heavy and prone to descend, being so profoundly hardened by dryness that they defy liquefaction. Conversely, metals possess a watery nature and may be readily melted. Naturalists readily concede and chemists empirically verify that these metallic forms are generated from a viscous water or an aqueous argent vive. Plants possess so profound an affinity with the air that, unless they are exposed to the open atmosphere, they will neither bud nor propagate. Similarly, all animals harbor within their natures a deeply fiery force, springing as they do from a celestial source. Fire is so intrinsic to them that, should it be extinguished, they immediately perish. Furthermore, each of these categories is distinguished within itself according to the varying degrees of the elements it contains. Among stones, those are specifically deemed earthy which are dark and ponderous. Those are considered watery which are transparent and compacted of moisture, such as crystal, beryl, and pearls found within the shells of aquatic creatures. Those stones are termed airy which float upon the water and possess a porous constitution, such as sponge stones, pumice, and the stone sophos. Finally, they are designated as fiery from which fire may be extracted, or which are forged by fire itself, such as thunderbolts, flint, and asbestos. Likewise, among metals, lead and silver are earthly. Quicksilver is watery. Copper and tin are airy, whereas gold and iron are fiery. Within the domain of plants, the roots correspond to the earth by virtue of their density, the leaves to water owing to their sap, the flowers to the air because of their subtlety, and the seeds to fire by reason of their generative spirit. Moreover, certain flora are classified as hot, cold, moist, or dry, deriving these fundamental designations from the intrinsic qualities of the elements. Among animals, some are relatively earthy and inhabit the subterranean depths, such as worms, moles, and various other creeping vermin. Others are watery, such as fishes. Others are airy, being entirely unable to survive devoid of the atmosphere. And still others are fiery, reputed to dwell within the flame itself, such as salamanders and crickets, or are characterized by a fiery internal heat, such as pigeons, ostriches, lions, and those creatures which the wise designate as fire-breathing beasts. Additionally, within the anatomy of animals, the bones correspond to the earth, the flesh to the air, the vital spirit to fire, and the humors to water. These humors similarly partake of the elements. Yellow color serves in the stead of fire, blood in the stead of air, phlegm in the stead of water, and black choler or melancholy in the stead of earth. Ultimately, within the soul itself, according to Augustine, the understanding resembles fire, reason corresponds to the air, imagination aligns with water, and the senses reflect the earth. These senses are further subdivided by the nature of the elements. Sight is fiery, being entirely incapable of perception without the presence of fire and light. Hearing is airy, for sound is generated by the striking of the air. Smell and taste emulate water, for without moisture there can be neither olfaction nor gustation. And finally, the sense of touch is wholly earthy, taking dense, material bodies as its subjects. The actions and operations of mankind are likewise governed by the elements. The earth signifies a slow and resolute motion. Water indicates timidity, sluggishness, and a remissness in labor. Air denotes cheerfulness and an amiable disposition, whereas fire represents a fierce, swift, and wrathful temperament. The elements, therefore, constitute the fundamental basis of all creation. All entities are composed of and accord with them, and they permeate all things, diffusing their virtues throughout the entirety of existence. Chapter 8. The Elements in Celestial Realms. It is the unanimous consensus of all Platonists that, just as in the original and archetypal world all things exist within all, so too in this corporeal realm are all things contained within all. Consequently, the elements reside not only within these inferior bodies but also within the heavens, the stars, the demons, the angels, and ultimately within God, the creator and paramount archetype of all existence. In these inferior bodies, the elements are accompanied by much gross matter. However, in the heavens, they exist alongside their inherent natures and virtues in a celestial and far more exalted manner than is found in sublunary forms. For there, the firmness of the celestial earth exists devoid of the denseness of water. The agility of the air operates without exceeding its boundaries, and the heat of fire endures without burning, serving only to illuminate and impart life to all creation through its warmth. Among the stars, certain bodies are fiery, such as Mars and Sol. Some are airy, such as Jupiter and Venus. Others are watery, such as Saturn and Mercury. And some are earthy, such as those that inhabit the eighth orb and the moon. The moon, functioning as though it were the earth, attracts the celestial waters to itself. Having imbibed them, it subsequently pours them forth and communicates them to us by virtue of its proximity. Furthermore, among the zodiacal signs, some are fiery, some earthy, some airy, and some watery. The elements govern them in the heavens as well, distributing among them the four tripartite phases of every element: the commencement, the progression, and the culmination. Thus, Aries possesses the beginning of fire, Leo its progression and augmentation, and Sagittarius its end. Taurus signifies the beginning of the earth, Virgo its progression, and Capricorn its end. Gemini marks the beginning of the air, Libra its progression, and Aquarius its end. Cancer represents the beginning of water, Scorpio its midpoint, and Pisces its culmination. Therefore, all material bodies are forged from the complex intermingling of these planets and signs alongside the elements. Moreover, demons are likewise distinguished from one another upon this account, such that some are categorized as fiery, others earthy, some airy, and some watery. From this elemental classification arise the four infernal rivers: the fiery Phlegethon, the airy Cocytus, the watery Styx, and the earthy Acheron. We also read in the Gospel of hellfire and eternal fire, into which the accursed shall be commanded to depart. In Revelation we encounter a lake of fire, and Isaiah speaks of the damned, stating that the Lord will smite them with corrupt air. In the book of Job, it is proclaimed that they shall pass from the waters of snow to the extremity of heat. And within that same text, we read that the earth is profoundly dark, enveloped in the shadow of death and a miserable obscurity. Furthermore, these elements are situated within the angels of heaven and the blessed intelligences. There exists within them a profound stability of essence, an earthly virtue that serves as the steadfast seed of God, while their mercy and piety represent a watery, cleansing virtue. Consequently, they are referred to as waters by the psalmist, who, speaking of the heavens, declares, "Thou who rulest the waters that are higher than the heavens." Moreover, their subtle breath corresponds to the air, and their love to radiant fire. Hence, They are styled in Scripture as the wings of the wind, and in another passage the psalmist speaks of them, saying, "Who makest angels thy spirits, and thy ministers a flaming fire." Furthermore, according to the hierarchical orders of angels, some are fiery, such as the seraphim, authorities, and powers. Some are earthy, such as the cherubim. Some are watery, such as the thrones and archangels. And some are airy, such as the dominions and principalities. Do we not also read concerning the original Creator of all things that the earth shall be opened and bring forth a Savior? Is it not spoken of him that he shall be a fountain of living water, both cleansing and regenerating? Is he not the same Spirit breathing the breath of life, and, according to the testimonies of Moses and Paul, a consuming fire? That the elements are to be found everywhere and in all things, each according to its own nature, no man can deny. They exist first within these inferior bodies as feculent and gross matter. Within the celestial spheres, they are purer and more luminous. Yet within the supercelestial realms, they are living and altogether blessed. Therefore, the elements within the archetypal world function as the ideas of things to be created. Within the intelligences, they are distributed powers. In the heavens, they manifest as virtues, and within inferior bodies, they take on gross material forms. Chapter 9. First, second, and third natural qualities. Regarding the natural virtues of things, some are fundamentally elementary, such as the capacities to heat, to cool, to moisten, and to dry. These are termed operations or primary qualities, alongside the secondary acts. For it is these qualities alone that are capable of wholly transmuting the entire substance, a profound transformation which none of the other attributes can achieve. Furthermore, certain attributes reside within entities compounded of the elements, transcending the primary qualities. These include properties capable of maturating, digesting, resolving, mollifying, hardening, restringing, absterging, corroding, burning, opening, evaporating, strengthening, mitigating, conglutinating, obstructing, expelling, retaining, attracting, repercussing, stupefying, bestowing, lubrifying, and numerous others. Elementary qualities perform multitudinous functions within a composite body that they are incapable of enacting within the elements themselves. These operations are designated as secondary qualities, for they derive from the nature and proportional mixture of the primary virtues, as is extensively expounded upon in medical and philosophical treatises. Just as maturation is the operation of natural heat in accordance with a specific proportion within the material substance, so induration is the operation of cold. The same principle applies to congelation and the remaining processes. Occasionally, these operations target a specific anatomical member, such as those that stimulate the production of water, milk, or menses, and are consequently termed tertiary qualities, which succeed the secondary just as the secondary succeed the primary. Accordingly, it is through the agency of these primary, secondary, and tertiary qualities that numerous maladies are both engendered and cured. Furthermore, there exist artificially crafted phenomena that provoke great wonder among mankind, such as the fire that burns water, commonly known as Greek fire. Aristotle elucidates numerous formulations of this in his dedicated treatise on the subject. Similarly, a fire may be produced that is extinguished by oil but kindled by the sprinkling of cold water, as well as a fire that is ignited by rain, wind, or the sun's rays. There is also a conflagration referred to as burning water, the preparation of which is widely understood, which consumes nothing but its own substance. Additionally, Unquenchable fires, incombustible oils, and perpetual lamps are fabricated, capable of resisting extinguishment by wind, water, or any other means. This would seem utterly incredible. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.